Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share.
We want to thank everybody for joining us this month with the Calibration Point Podcast, and we're excited to have the next segment of the leadership focus we've been doing on understanding Senator Crane and your whole focus on leadership development and moving it through this process of really just deep exploration and discovery. And I want to have you kind of reset the table as we talk. But for anybody who's coming in late and only picking up this one, we did a first segment on leadership where you did kind of set the foundations in place. And now we've taken each part of your equation and we're doing one additional segment for each one. And then we're also going to have to use your words, a bookend session where we're going to help everybody to know, okay, how do you land the plane with this? And then how do you even get more insight and information from you directly as they venture down this leadership process? So for those who are new to the segment, I want to introduce Senator John Crane. And John is just an amazing in so many different ways of leadership and your career. You're also the founder of JBC Leadership Strategies, which you've taken your acumen, your expertise, your political savvy and leadership, and now put it into a platform where you can really help others. And just really blessed that you're willing to take the time that you have, John, and just work with us and our listeners to begin to at least connect in some way to what has been revealed to you as a leader and your process. So thank you so much for doing that. It is a great blessing.
Well, absolutely, Jamie. It's always a pleasure to get connected with you and get back on the podcast. And I thank you for wanting to have these conversations because I think they're so critically important. I've been doing a lot of leadership training for close to 30 years. And most of the time it was actually in the context of the church or Christian nonprofits or things like that. And then I got elected to the Senate. And then you begin to realize like, wow, as much as we assume that all the political leaders are top-notch leaders, and many of them are, you also realize that there's some basic things that if you haven't been taught, you miss them, right? And so with my huge passion for leadership that actually went into the decision for why I term limited myself after 2 terms in the Senate here in Indiana, and wanted to be able to get back to my true love, which is helping empower people to get better at becoming their best in whatever leadership context they're in. And so I'm grateful for you being able to have me on again as we continue through this series and frame out really some key areas of emphasis that every leader, I think, needs to understand. And just by way of quick review, the framework that we're using is one that I use with a lot of people, and it's what we call the why, the where, the who, and the how of leadership. And so as we begin to unpack those, we've already done the why, and today we'll talk about the where. I think hopefully that'll be helpful to your audience.
Absolutely. And we really appreciate that. And I'm, again, excited that we can have a kind of a land the plane bookend session where we can show here's how each of the segments that we've done. And if I think of it as kind of each of the parts of the equation, and you do a great job with each one of these showing how it fits in the bigger picture, but then to be able to just talk together about, okay, how do you put the pieces together and actually implement it and allow that next segment where we do get into the where to be just focused on the where, knowing that for our listeners, that we do have a follow-up coming from that. So let's start with this third piece of the equation and the who, and not the band for those maybe we're dating ourselves, but how do we unpack what the who is in this now leadership process?
Yeah. So when we talk about the why, the where, the who, and the how, the who involves 2 different entities. One is the individual who's the leader, and then of course the people that are being led. So you've got 2 different people. And leadership, by definition, is based on relational proximity right?
Mm-hmm.
The closer I'm in connection with the people I'm trying to lead, the more effectiveness that I can have as a leader to be able to impact their lives, impact our organization or whatever it is that we're advancing. And so when it comes to the who, one of the things that I share with leaders all the time, and it's not rocket science, but it's this idea that if you want to learn to lead others well, you first have to lead yourself well, right?
Right.
There's only one person on the planet that I spend 24/7 with every single day of the year, and that's me. And so my ability to be able to impact people will be determined by my own disciplines, my own health, my own outlook on life, my own understanding of what the mission is, not just for our particular organization or our particular entity, our business, whatever it is, but also within the larger context of life itself, right? The issues of purpose and why am I here and what am I about and those kinds of things. And then how do we integrate those? If I don't understand that, then I'm not in a position to be able to help other people understand that. And if I am not in a position where I'm taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, then I don't have enough gas in the tank or enough experience in the tank to be able to then take our organization where it needs to go. So the first focus in this who is me as a leader. And
Okay.
I think it's very important for us to take that seriously. And I think a lot of good leaders give lip service to it. I give a good lip service to it, but when's the last time that I, took a sabbatical? Well,
Right.
I can't remember, right? Because I'm too busy trying to do all these good things that I've been called to do. And so I think it's important to do that first initial self-assessment and say, okay, if I want to lead others well, I got to lead myself well. So where am I on all these different categories? And I think once we begin to do that, we get a clearer sense of our starting point based on where we want to go.
Which connects directly to last segment's topic on the where. Just for those who are now connecting, just how these two go together. Yeah, I heard a funny story, and I don't know if it was true or not, but the story is of two sailors that come into a harbor town, and they were on leave and they were out late one night, and apparently they were having a little bit too much to drink, and they were trying to figure out how to get back to the ship. And so they go up to a nicely dressed officer who was there, think, okay, well, he'll tell us. And they go up and they ask him, hey, do you know where we are? And the officer looks at them and says, gentlemen, do you know who I am? And the two sailors look at one another, the two privates say, well, now we're really in trouble. We don't know where we are, and he doesn't know who he is. And your last two segments put together really well. Where are we and who are we really
right.
do play together, and how we figure our identity out. Not that all the elements don't, but I mean, these two really connect well for those who haven't heard the other two segments. Yeah, the other thing too, I would just add in as commentary. There was a podcast that I have on here about rest and care for a leader, and just one of the stats that I share in there. We do a lot of executive director health assessments nationally, and there's great research out of UPenn that shows that if individuals in the U.S. economy would actually maximize their time off and take their vacation time, that the increase, the primary economic impact is like $500 billion. It's over the top, let alone all the secondary positive benefits that come, just to your point, on taking care of ourselves as a leader, taking time off and being willing to set boundaries. And so I want to use that maybe as a jump off point. One of the challenges I find with leaders, especially in trying to get deeper into the elements that you just mentioned, is the discipline to either set boundaries, give themselves personal permission, and or feel that they have organizational permission to take care of themselves and to really focus on who they are as a leader. What do you see in that? How do you address that? Where do you?
Well, you're exactly right. And, you don't have to look at all those economic numbers to know that we are working ourselves into the ground, right? And we take on this badge of honor, right? When we talk to people and initially, hey, how you doing? What's the universal answer? I'm busy, right? And we might caveat that, well, that's a good busy, but we're busy, we're busy, we're busy.
Right.
And it's just kind of accepted. And I get it. We should be productive. We should be forward focused and doing the things that we're called to do. But there's a certain rhythm that God designed originally, right? He didn't take a seventh day to rest because he was tired, right? He took the seventh day to rest to model for us a proper rhythm. And I've found in my own life, my dad was pretty good about taking a Sabbath each week.
Mhm.
And it took me a while to kind of get into that, even though he had modeled it well. And then I got to a point where I realized, look, if I don't take one day in 7, I'm in trouble, right? Like I
Right.
just don't have the energy. I don't have the focus. I've got a bunch of demands on my time, but I don't have enough in the physical or emotional tank to be able to actually function. And at
Yeah.
some point, I can fake it for a while, right? I've got a strong will or I've got a high pain tolerance or I'm very capable. So I can fake it for a long time, but I can't fake it forever. In fact, just about a year or so ago, my wife and I were down with a group in Guatemala,
Mhm.
and we're doing some leadership training as part of that trip. And we were speaking at a conference that was focused on mental health and mental health for all kinds of leaders, but primarily faith leaders and so forth. And one of the things that I shared was that one of the most courageous things that a leader can do is to raise their hand and simply say, I need some help.
Yeah.
Well, that goes against our human nature, right? Our human nature is to be independent, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? To will ourselves to victory and all those kinds of things. And we have narratives in the culture that continue to perpetuate that myth, right?
Yep.
But the reality is that we all need help. We all need accountability. As I tell people often, leadership is a team sport, and we could typically see it in other people, right? Oh man, they're
Yep.
really running on empty, not realizing that they're looking at us saying the same thing,
That's right.
but we're blind to it in our own journey.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And understanding those closest to us and their perceptions, is that part of how you recommend, or tell us, how do you recommend someone better understands the who about themselves?
Yeah, so I think that there's some proactive things you can do on the front end, right? We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about that a few
Yep.
minutes ago. And that is do regular check-ins with yourself, just regularly. What are the metrics by which I measure my spiritual health, my physical health, my emotional health, all those things. And then have somebody that's a close confidant that loves you enough to be honest with you in a kind, compassionate way.
Yeah.
Not, hey, you're an idiot, get your act together, but
Right.
really coming alongside you and saying, hey, I care for you and I'm seeing something that's of concern to me. My wife and I do that for each other quite a bit, is just kind of keeping an eye on things, checking the gauges on your dashboard, right? And if you see
Yep.
something that's a little low or something that's a little off, kind of speaking into that and encouraging and challenging the person to take whatever steps they need to make. I think the other thing, and this is so hard, is we have got to get to a point, and I struggle with this. We've got to get to a point where we give ourselves permission, true permission for self care, right? Because we tend to think of self care as weak. I used to think
Right.
this, they just need to buck themselves up.
Yep.
Cranes don't quit. That's kind of like cranes don't quit. We just keep going. Well, giving yourself true permission for self care doesn't have to be, okay, I'm going to take the next 6 months off and lie around on the couch and do nothing.
Right.
It means I'm going to incorporate these regular rhythms. It's a weekly rhythm, it's a monthly rhythm, quarterly, annually. I'm going to put these rhythms in place. One of the best things that you can do in that is this is very practical. Reach far enough out on your calendar where there's a lot of white space now and actually plug in things that are, like I'm taking this day and it's going
Hmm.
to be a self-reflection day, or it's going to be I'm just taking a day off with the family or whatever it is, or I'm going to take this weekend, or actually I'm going to take a week or 10 days, put it far enough out, right? Let's say a day. You're going to take a Friday, let's say. I'm going to take the whole
Yeah.
day. And it's far enough out that when you get there and you're looking at your calendar, you're like, holy cow, wait a second. Like, there's nothing going on. That's
Right.
amazing. It's like my wife and I, when we'll check in, hey, what's happening this weekend? And we've got 4 very active, growing, now they're almost out of the house, but kids that are active. And I'd ask
Right.
her, hey, what's going on? And occasionally be like, you know what? Nothing.
Nothing.
And you kind of go, what? Are you serious? And then you breathe a sigh of relief, like, wow, okay, this could be valuable and get a chance to kind of reset. So I
Yeah.
think doing that intentionally and then guarding it. Because if you don't mentally give yourself permission, then it's always, you always have this mental kind of, I call it like this little hesitation of like, well, I'm going to do it if I can pull it off, but then you schedule over it because you had something that was more important. But you got to realize, like, look, if you're no good, if you're not taking care of yourself, then ultimately you're going to be no good for the people that need your leadership.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And just share an example. In our company, one of the things that we do is all of our staff are mandated every month to take one retreat day. And so it's a monthly rhythm that they have to take. And then to your point about accountability, we as a team of leaders in our organization, I mean, all of us as staff, I mean, we help ensure accountability to everybody else. So if you're not taking it, there are people who are paying attention to it and making sure that everybody is taking the time to have that at least one day a month where they've
Yeah.
blocked out and it's just purely for renewal. And in our case, I mean, I tell them if it brings renewal, I don't care what it is. If that's painting, if that's fishing, whatever it is, if it's going to help you be in a better place for those we serve, I want you to do that.
Well,
And
and to that point, I will never forget a conference call I was on with Mike Pence. This was back when he was a congressman, long
Yep.
before he became the vice president. And I was with a group, and so we had the opportunity to ask him some questions. And I thought, well, shoot, I'm not going to miss out on this opportunity. And he had made some comment about Sundays and really trying to help his congressional staff find those rhythms, and they were
Yep.
taking that seriously and so forth. So I asked a follow-up question in relation to that concept of one day off, and he made the point. He said, we take it very seriously. If one of the staffers violates that, we'll give them one warning, and if they violate it more than once, they might not be
Yeah.
working here anymore.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, okay, like when you say you take it seriously, you really mean it. And it
Yep.
isn't meant to infringe on our lives. It's actually meant to be a blessing and a recharge. It's just that we're going so fast, we don't pit very often.
Yeah.
We just keep putting our foot on the gas and going full tilt.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's got to be in the culture, to your point, and people enforce it. And, with us, I usually do my retreat day once a month on a Friday, but some people do it on a Wednesday. Sometimes it's a Monday. And so, it curates some quirkiness if we're not all paying attention to everybody's schedules, like, oh, well, John's out for the day because it's his retreat day. But if your culture is built around that, then everybody's paying attention to it, and you get rid of the quirkiness. And in the nonprofit space, one of the challenges we have, like, I can do that in our company. We have 18, and I don't have a board of directors as a private company that I'm also now having to manage up to our executive directors and their space. That often is a complexity, right? Where you could have a board that maybe half of them feel that absolutely you should be doing this. Then half of them are like, no, where are your bootstraps pulled up? And why aren't you just out there grinding? And it really, these things, I want to make sure that our listeners are hearing what you're saying. It's not just about the leader, but this is part of our culture. And so even how I recruit board members, this should be part of my understanding. What does a board member think about leadership care? And what does a board member think about this whole process? Like, do they know these things about who they are as leaders coming onto my board? Because if I'm an executive director listening to this, now I'm managing my team, but I'm also having to manage up to now a volunteer body of governance that may or may not be aligned with what's best for me as a leader. And I mean, obviously, I would love to be able to say that, yeah, of course, boards want what's best for their executive director. And you and I know that's just not always the case. And sometimes it's just an implicit bias that, they're not set out to. And I want to intentionally harm John as my ED. It's just that my way of life may not actually be creating value for me as a leader. And now I'm projecting that onto you as the ED.
Well, and that's exactly right. It's not that, you want what's best and they don't want what's best. It's they want what's best and you want what's best.
Right.
The question is, are we defining that in the same way? And
exactly.
The way that you begin to make sure that you have better alignment is, are we valuing the same set of priorities and principles that should guide our organization or our team or whatever it might be? And that's why the one who is connected to the other who, right? The one who is me as the leader, the other who is the people I'm leading. And if you then say, hey, this is who we are, and you've mentioned that even with your organization, where you are setting that example from the top, well, it becomes a natural vetting process too, right? Where if I come to work for your organization and you've got something that you value that I don't really think is that important, but you say, hey, no, this is, well, then I got a choice to make. I either get aligned with that or I go find employment elsewhere, which is fine.
Right.
But the value of leading yourself well is then, hopefully, if you're doing it well, you are modeling for your people, hey, here's what the rhythms of effective leadership should be looking like in your life. Because that's one of the things that is our baseline idea about leadership. Leadership's about intentional influence, which means that leadership isn't necessarily guided by position or title. Position or title expands your influence, but it doesn't determine your influence. You can have personal influence, even if you don't have positional influence, if you're on mission and being able to share with people, hey, this is what I'm about, and modeling for them, right? So if you, as the top leader in an organization or the pastor or whatever, are modeling for your people, then they can then in turn model that for others. I remember years ago, I was on staff at a church, and of course, you can't take Sunday off because that's your big day. So the expectation was, hey, you take a different day of the week off.
Yep.
And they verbalized, hey, don't show up. But then if their day off was on a different day, occasionally I'd see them showing up, right? And you're kind of like, well, how serious are we about this?
What are we doing? Right.
1 in 7 rhythm that we're called to pursue. So I get it. Sometimes you got to pop in. But if you're not consistent with here's what we value, and therefore this is how this plays out in my life, then you end, I think, really undermining your credibility. And ultimately, you're going to lose some really high quality folks on your team because high quality people want high expectations. They want consistency so that trust is built. Then we can go do great things together.
Yeah, that goes hand in. I heard a leader that I listen to sometimes on his podcast, and he short little segments, and he made the comment basically referring to what you're talking about. Now when all of a sudden the high performer, the high impact leader in my organization leaves, that the first thing we should be asking them was not just why are they leaving, but how did they do what they did while they were here? And what we often find out, the reason they did it is because they self-sacrificed themselves, and that's why they're leaving, is because they're done sacrificing everything without the support they need.
That's right. That's right.
Goes to your point.
Yeah, and so then it becomes this cascading effect, right? Because not only are you're losing one of your high flyers who's very competent, very capable, doing a ton of things, all the things that they were doing and the extra things that they were doing are now on somebody else's plate. And I have to go find somebody new or more than one person and go through the whole hiring process and onboarding process to make up for the loss, as opposed to taking a percentage of that time on the front end and really pouring into that high flyer and helping them spread their wings, empowering them, to maximize all the gifts and skill sets that they have for the betterment of the organization. It's a net win if I'm proactive enough to do that on the front end versus having to deal with all the fallout on the back end.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So bringing this together then for our listeners, the who refers to you. And then the second follow-up to that is once you figure out the who, figure out what you need as a leader, is what I'm hearing you say, then be sure that we have the discipline in the organization to help you accomplish that. And
that's right. Because the who is two parts. It's you and the people that you're leading, right? It starts with you.
Right. That's right.
Then it pivots to, here's the other part of the who is, who are the people that are in your organization? Who are the people that are in your team? Who are the people that are on your executive team versus the folks that are on other teams? All the variables of the human component that makes up your organization or entity or church or political campaign or whatever.
Right. No,
and
that's really good.
It's all integrated, right? It's all integrated, but it starts from the top.
Yeah. And remember, everyone, as you're listening, the other segments go hand in hand with this. And we've got another one that's coming, which is the where. So this is designed to be a 4-part equation that then we're also going to do a segment to help you kind of land the plane on these together and bring it all home. So thank you so much. Always appreciate your unpacking this with us and really look forward to us continuing to roll this out.
You bet. Glad to do it.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.